Welcome to iopenminds.net and this web exclusive on being a 21st century parent. This workshop is obviously perfect for parents, but also for anybody that deals with youth, like teachers, youth leaders. This provides them an opportunity to give advice to the parents of the children that they deal with. So I encourage everyone to listen attentively and leave your comments in our blog page. In terms of being a 21st century parent, there are many directions that you can go with and a lot of great advice that can be given. But there are three essential elements that I wanted to focus on. First, a 21st century education. Secondly, 21st century communication. And thirdly, building 21st century relationships. When it comes to education, there's always been kind of an old school way of doing things and then a new paradigm that's based on our current context. Now, maybe the way that we were raised and the kind of perspective that maybe our parents had, and even with ourselves, we kind of have this view, is that when it comes to education, the school takes care of everything. We drop our children off at school. The purpose of the school is to take care of all their educational needs, emotional needs, behavioral needs, even their character development. And if they're not doing that, there's something wrong with the school, and we put all the blame on the school. But that whole paradigm has shifted. One of the main things that we really have to realize is that number one, parental involvement is vital at schools. Not only involved in homework and helping the students with their actual content, but also being involved in just asking questions about how things are going. There's so many other factors like bullying that are going on, a lot of the stresses of being in school and pressures, whether it be because of the academics, because of the behavior, because of peers. It's very important that the parents are involved intimately in the child's education. And not just that, being involved also in being visible at the school itself. So making sure that the teachers know who you are, the administration knows who you are. If there's certain issues that are relevant to you in your particular context, maybe for religious reasons, or for whatever special need that your child may have, you need to be visible. You need to be vocal. You need to be seen and heard, and as much as possible. If it's a grander issue that maybe affects multiple families, you need to go as a block of people, really be seen, be heard, be felt. That's really the only way nowadays you'll be able to get things to happen at the school. So it's really important that you become involved with your child's education. You can't just drop them off and expect everything to work out. Secondly, there's a lot of important and essential skills that your child will need to be successful as they get older that the schools are not able to address because of so much of the mandated curriculums, the content that has to be covered, the standardized tests that they need to be prepared for. And oftentimes these, what they call soft skills or other essential skills, end up not being taught at all. So it ends up that as a parent, you're going to have to do some of that. And I'll get into that in a minute. And finally, when it comes to the moral and behavioral character development upbringing of your child, really nowadays, with the way things are going in schools, where it's almost like an anything goes kind of a situation in the schools. Not that they allow anything to happen, but it's very difficult to express any kind of morals, because they don't want you to feel like you're judging this person or that person, or having a favoritism towards one belief system or another. So if you do have strong convictions in those regards, you're going to have to really do a lot at home. And even if you send your child to a religious school, to expect the school to take care of all of those issues is really unrealistic as well. The school should be supplementing what you're doing at home. So again, if your child goes to a religious school, it should be adding to what you're already doing at home. So to expect the school to do all of it on their own also is something that's not quite realistic. And one of the biggest issues is if there are contradictions between what's going on at home and what's being taught at school. Because even though the child may be at school for 8 hours a day, those 8 hours are extremely influential. So if you are very religiously inclined and you send your child to a public school, those 8 hours in a public school will completely undo the things that you're trying to do at home, and vice versa. If you send your child to a religious school and they're learning these certain aspects and you yourself are not implementing them in your life, you yourself are kind of contradicting that'll erase everything that's been happening in the school. So it's very important to have that consistency between the two areas. Now, to get into a little bit more detail, you must teach children their purpose in their life. So, in terms of, as a Muslim parent, you want to teach your child, you have to teach your child that they are a worshiper of God, a worshiper of Allah, ibadullah, and that they are khalifatullah, that they are representatives of Allah on this earth. So, and even outside of Islam, just on a grander scale, we've been put here on this earth to be those who worship God, but not worship just in the sense of praying all the time, fasting all the time, doing other acts of worship, just all those various things. It's really more about your day to day interactions with people. Are they the type of interactions that would be pleasing to God, pleasing to your Creator, pleasing to Allah? The way that you conduct yourself, the way that you carry yourself, what is your attitude like, what is your work ethic like, are you trying your best, are you honest, are you trustworthy? All those day-to-day type of interactions, that's what it means to be a worshiper of Allah, because you know that God is watching you and you want to please Him always. So there's no way you can cheat, there's no way you can deceive, there's no way you can do any of those negative things, because you know God is watching you. Now, on the other side, they also need to know that their purpose is to be a representative of God on this earth. So, Allah has sent messengers, He sent books and rules and all these different type of things, and our responsibility is to carry those things out and bring the world closer to justice. And we see in all these philosophy courses, you go to university, the big thing that everybody's trying to figure out is, what is my purpose in life? Why am I here? What's the point? Right? And because just like if you have a business or an organization or institution, your mission and your vision are vital. It gives you direction. And the same thing with us as individuals. If we don't have a purpose driven life, if we don't have a personal mission, a personal vision of what we're supposed to do, it makes our life very difficult. And when it comes to happiness and motivation and all these things, it's really important for us to keep that perspective. So, first and foremost, as parents, as educators, we have to teach what is our purpose in life. And that requires obviously spiritual development, knowing who God is, knowing who the prophets are, knowing what our acts of worship are, and making those connections on the spiritual level. And then also on the character level with our manners and our etiquettes and our behaviors. Are we involved with helping other people? We can't make things just about ourselves. We can't be just completely independently thinking in the sense that it's all about me. It's a dog eat dog world. I'm going to do whatever I can to be successful. This is not the way of that worshiper of Allah. This is not the way of that representative of God on this earth. We have to be of those that help other people. So that's vitally important, and that has to happen from the parent side. And again, to expect the schools to be able to do that. Obviously, public schools wouldn't do that at all. But even if you went to a Muslim school, you went to a Christian school, Jewish school, to expect them to instill that 100% in the children is unrealistic. Again, there needs to be a consistency between what the home is teaching and what the school is teaching, and they can complement each other. Now, the second big thing that I had mentioned earlier was this idea of soft skills, or these 21st century skills. Um, so I like to, when I give this workshop in person, I like to ask the audience about thinking about somebody who's very successful in whatever career that they're in. So, the people that are sitting there in the audience, or for you that's listening, think of those people who you would define as being very successful in your profession, in your career path, whether you were in college, and there were just certain students, certain professionals that were able to take themselves to the next level. And you really think about, okay, what was it that they had? What was so special about them? Knowledge wise, they were probably very similar to other people. They got the same kind of degrees, the same, maybe similar types of experiences. What is it that brought them to the next level? And a lot of it probably went around these soft skills. So, for example, they were well organized. They knew where everything was. They can follow up very easily. Organizational skills. They somehow, somewhere, they learned that. Time management, being able to multitask, being able to, fit things in. Everybody has 24 hours in a day. Every single person, and not everybody who's very productive stays up all night long doing work. Many of them are, figure out how to manage things, and it's really about managing your time and prioritizing, and making sure you do the most important things first and not get sidetracked with tangents. So time management, those are the things we need to instill in our children. Again, a lot of times the schools themselves cannot do that for various other reasons that I mentioned before. Also, successful people know how to manage money. This is really not taught in schools. Very rarely is money management taught in schools. Entrepreneurship is not taught in schools either. So being independent in a financial sense is something that's very important. Um, Communication skills have really been thrown out of the window. They're trying to bring it back a little bit, but in large part, when it comes to public speaking, when it comes to writing properly, when it comes to debate, expressing your views and opinions, this is something that everybody, is kind of a little bit nervous about doing it, but it's something that every person needs to be able to do. How to compose, that right proposal letter, or that important email. How to address, if you had to give a presentation in your job, a proposal, something for a grant. Being able to kind of debate your opinion, your view, for the future of a business, for example. These are extremely important skills. Communication skills are extremely important. Civic duty, civil rights, your responsibilities to your community. This is also very important. Again, it's not just about you, it's about your society, your community, your locality. What role do you play? What rights do you have? This is also very important. And finally, are you taking care of yourself? Are you healthy? Are you eating right? Are you exercising? This is a responsibility. Our body has rights over us, and we have to fulfill those rights. And a lot of times you cannot be productive if you're not healthy. So many of the issues that we see, sometimes with things, for example, like ADHD. Yes, there are some cases of legitimate ADHD, but in a lot of cases, it has to do with nutrition, proper sleep. Are they just too involved with, screen time and video games and TV and movies and internet and all that kind of stuff? So, are we living a healthy life? So, these are some of those, essential skills that we have to instill in our children. So, this idea of education and the parents' role in education is very, very important. Now, the second big overarching aspect that I wanted to talk about when it comes to being a 21st century parent is communication. And the old school way that it was, we always said that kids only speak when they're spoken to, and that certain things should never be discussed. So nowadays, that also is just completely been thrown out of the window. And in some regards, it's a good thing that this paradigm has shifted. Um, First of all, there's no such thing as a taboo topic. Nothing is taboo anymore. In schools, they're bringing up every issue. They see it now on the internet. They have access to information that we never had access to before, and they're taught very much to question everything. Why this, why that? There's certain things that we always used to do, whether it's a cultural thing, whether it's a religious thing, where it's just, we're from this part of the country, and this is just how we do things, and people ask why. And they're being taught to ask why, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with asking why. We had to be prepared. We had to be prepared to answer those questions. So this idea of communication is really important. How do we address these questions? How do we prepare our children for when these questions are asked of them? That's where communication is very important. So, one of the biggest tips that I always try to give is make sure that you're eating dinner with your family and asking open ended questions about how things are going in the day. You can't just say, how was everything? Okay. Well, you got to follow that up. What was okay about it? Tell me the best part of your day. You know, find out about their interests, find out about what's going on in school. How did that chemistry exam go? How did that football game? Did you go to the football game? Was it fun? Who did you meet? Just asking those general type of questions. And when I say eating dinner with the family, that means you're all sitting together, not that you're all home at the same time. And your son is in front of the TV, the father's in the bedroom, mom is just eating right there in the kitchen or whatever, the dining room table, and nobody's sitting next to each other. That's not eating dinner together just because you're in the house at the same time. So making sure that you're actually sitting together, eating together, having a special quality time, and it's a non-judgmental time also. That's very important too. So let's say you do inquire about the test that they had and they didn't do as well as they had wished. That's not the time to start getting angry and yelling and getting upset and, oh, I knew you were going to do bad because you didn't study enough. That's not the time for that. Let this time be a safe time where people can openly communicate, and really start building some of those relationships. And that goes to that third point that I was going to talk about. Secondly, again, asking about interests, finding out about them sincerely, and some of it, honestly, we can care less about. Again, a certain sport maybe that they like, a video game that they like. Certain things that are going on in school. Maybe they're really into computers, and we can care less about computers. But you just gotta ask. You just have to talk, and you be the one to initiate these conversations, so that they feel that they have this open communication and that you want to be a part of the conversation, not that it's only coming from them. Now, this third point is really important about being proactive. So, as I mentioned, there's nothing taboo anymore. So many things are being brought up in schools, and some of them, again, are things that we maybe don't even like that our children are discussing, or that even that the teachers are bringing up. But it's there, and it's a reality, and we have to figure out how we're going to deal with it before we deal with it. And we have to help coach our children and guide our children through those situations before they're faced with them. So, some of these difficult topics, we need to think about and discuss with them before they're exposed, in order to equip our children with the proper responses to those different types of questions or those different types of issues. So, now, for example, the concept of same-sex marriage, is prominent. How are we dealing with that? How are we discussing that? Have you had the discussion with your children about that? As they're reaching puberty and their feelings are starting to change and their bodies are starting to change, you have to tell the children ahead of time that they should anticipate this, and this is, you know, your advice to them in terms of how they should deal with those changes, and that they're normal. Not that they're strange, not that there's something wrong that's happening. It's perfectly normal that these things are happening, but how do you deal with them? How do you deal with them in a way, again, from a religious perspective, how do you deal with them in a way that is pleasing to God, right? Because, again, they're going to be confronted with these issues. So they'll be better equipped to face the issue when they're confronted with them, as opposed to either being completely lost, getting their advice from people who maybe wouldn't give the best advice. And what it does also is, because you open the conversation ahead of time, once they are confronted with it, they may feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it because you've brought it up already. And again, you're kind of bringing it up in a non-judgmental way, as best as possible, and obviously age appropriate. So you don't want to just tell them everything right from the beginning, especially when it comes to puberty and body changes and all these other kind of issues that come with that. You do it bit by bit as they grow. And finally, and this is a really big tip that I would suggest too, is that get your children involved in some of the decisions of the household, and some of the ones obviously that aren't that big of a deal. But they start to feel empowered. They start to feel that their opinion is valued. So that's very important. So, for example, let's say, just as simple as, where do you want to go to dinner? Open the door for them to give their feedback, and try every once in a while to go with one of their selections. It could be a big thing about family vacation. Maybe in your mind you thought going to Disney was a great idea, and to them they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to go there. I'm too old for Disney." And ask them for their advice, and they may have very good ideas. Again, now they start feeling like they're more important, that they're maturing, that their ideas are valued, and that's just a way for them to help grow as well. And then you start getting into going back and forth. Well, give me the pros and cons. So now they start thinking more critically. So this is a very important process to their growth and development, and them, learning how to be a parent themselves for when they become parents. Now, finally, the third aspect was in terms of building the proper relationship. A lot of it has to deal with communication, but the third thing when it comes to relationship building is talking about time. Talking about time. And the old school thing was just work, work, work. My wife will take care of everything at home. All I have to do is just bring home the money, and I'm good. And I kick up my feet, and I'm done. And that obviously now, with all the influences that's going on, and it's nonstop influences with the TV and 24-hour TV and internet and social media, all these things. The influences are hitting your children 24 hours. Where the expectation of the wife is way more than the traditional family sense. So especially if the wife is contributing outside of the home, to expect her to do everything inside of the home and do everything outside of the home is completely unfair, to be honest. So as the man, they would have to do more in the home if you're expecting the wife to do more out of the home. But either way, it has to be a team environment when it comes to the spouses in terms of raising the children and the time spent with the children. It can't be that just the mother is raising the children, particularly raising the sons. So both parents are vitally, essentially needed when it comes to raising a child. And it goes back to the educational component. It goes back to the communication component. It can't be that just one parent is doing all the education, or that one parent is doing all the communication. One parent is, spending all the time. It needs to be both are doing all of them. Both are doing all of them. Now, obviously, maybe one parent's a little bit better at certain things than others, and that's fine. But that communication between the parents themselves and how they're going to strategize and deal with these issues is very, very important. This societal influences may not be Islamic, or obviously not may not be religious. So your interaction is very important, so they know how to confront these issues when they are facing them. And as I mentioned before, if both parents are working, you can expect the same old views of the responsibility division amongst the parents. So, just some quick tips again. If we expect that all we have to do is just work, and sometimes that working becomes 50 hours, 60 hours, 70 hours, and it's because we have this view about what we want for our home and our car and our this and our that and our vacations, and this type of cable subscription and telephones and all this kind of stuff, technology in the house. Um, and if all of that you desire requires a certain amount of time at work, you may have to rethink your priorities. And if you want the right type of children that aren't going to, cause all these headaches and issues, and things are going to come up. I mean, there's no perfect solution. But if you really want to develop those relationships and that communication, and it takes that time commitment with the education, that may mean that you have to reprioritize the things in your life to afford you the time to be able to come home and build those relationships, do that education, do that communication. So that's, super, super important. It's some very difficult decisions that might need to be made. It's going to take consultation with your spouse. It's going to take some discussion with your children, but you're going to have to make those decisions. You can't expect a perfect situation, and the perfect children when you're not putting in the time and the effort to make that happen. And sometimes that requires quite a bit of sacrifice. Um, Secondly, plan times. The same way you may plan a time, whether it's dinner time, to have that communication time. Plan time that's just fun time. Once a week, a couple times a week, you have a game night where you just take up board games and play together, or you go out, out for dinner, out to do, a fun activity. But it needs to be planned in, and that goes to the time management, even for yourself. As a parent, block it out in your schedule, put it in your calendar, and that's it. No matter what comes up, I'm sorry, I'm busy. This is a blocked in time. Just like if it was a meeting at work, or a big time business transaction, this is your family business. This is a priority. And this is something that you'll be held accountable for. So you want to make sure that that priority is given its just due. And finally, like I mentioned before, you really have to discuss these divisions of responsibility with your spouse to make sure that all the needs of the family are met, and they're met fairly, and that it's something that you can handle and maintain consistently through time. We really encourage you to join our email list and to go out and tell your friends about I Open Minds so they can also join the email list. We're going to be having a lot of workshops, particularly for teachers, especially for new teachers and those trying to bring their craft to the next level. We're going to be having courses for homeschoolers, and we're going to have an exclusive course coming up soon about Islam and the Constitution. So that dealing a lot with current events, we like to do that as well. Again, about Islam and the Constitution. So stay tuned, stay posted, and make sure that you're on our email list so that you can find out and then sign up for all of the upcoming iOpenminds.net courses. Take care, God bless, and peace out.